If you're looking for an electric vehicle that seats 3 rows of people, you don't have too many options in the United States, but soon we're going to be getting a new and very exciting one from Volvo. This is the new EX90. Eventually, this is likely to replace the XC90 in Volvo's lineup, so I apologize if I'm confusing EX and XC in this video. But at least for the moment, interestingly, Volvo has said that they're going to keep building the existing XC90. Now, you could also compare this against something like a Mercedes-Benz EQS 3-row, but this has a more usable third row in the back, and it is much more conventionally shaped, which is the other interesting twist with this EX90. It's not shaped like a teardrop like we find in the Tesla lineup or in that Mercedes 3-row vehicle. In some ways, this actually reminds me a little bit of the profile that we expect to see in the upcoming Kia EV9. The EX90 also shows us the design and technology direction for the entire Volvo brand, and of course that electrification path as well. Volvo has arguably made more progress when it comes to electrification than any other mainline auto manufacturer except for the full EV startups. Last year, about half of Volvo's sales in the state of California were at least a plug-in hybrid, and that number is incredibly high nationally and worldwide. The next car company doesn't even come close. If you're looking to get your hands on an EX90, they're available for pre-order now, and depending on where you are in the world, you might be able to get your hands on one in 2023 or 2024. This is going to be built in Volvo's new South Carolina factory, and as a result, certain versions at least may qualify for some portion of the federal tax credit. It's still a little too early to tell exactly which versions and how much they may qualify for, but expect more information on that to come soon. Let's talk about the design. It is instantly recognizable as a Volvo, of course, because we have this big Volvo logo up front, but it's also been very definitely designed to be an electric vehicle right from the beginning. So lots of really clean aerodynamic lines up front, this really clean cut-in line for the hood, and this really, really cool headlight design. What's interesting about this headlight design is that you're really just seeing the shutters that are hiding the headlight inside. When you turn on the headlights, this actually opens up. It's a mechanical mechanism. It opens up and reveals the full matrix LED headlights behind. Wondering where the turn signals are? They're this section right down here. And then all around the vehicle, you notice there are a ton of ultrasonic sensors. In fact, there are a ton of sensors on the EX90 period, because this is designed to be not only the first completely ground-up designed electric Volvo, it's designed to be the safest Volvo that they've ever built. And as a result, we get tons and tons of sensors. Ultrasonic sensors on the front, ultrasonic sensors all the way around the side of the EX90, cameras everywhere on this vehicle, cameras that are looking down on the lane lines, cameras that are looking aside the vehicle, radar sensors built into the vehicle, and the industry-first standard LiDAR sensor. That's what's this sort of a beluga whale-shaped thing right here on top of the vehicle, just behind the windscreen. And then, of course, we have the entire sensor module that we've seen in other Volvos for some time behind the glass of the windscreen itself. As always, there are a lot of details we don't know. For instance, we don't know exactly which autonomy level the EX90 will support, but we do know it is going to come with the hardware required for higher levels of autonomy than exist in the Volvo lineup right now. That one LiDAR sensor, 5 radars, we get 8 cameras, and 16 ultrasonic sensors all the way around the vehicle. You'll notice that the profile is also much more traditional than the average 3-row EV that we see currently on sale in the United States. It is much boxier, definitely very in keeping with the Volvo design theme. We do have a roofline that is a little bit lower than the XC90, obviously for aerodynamic reasons, but they've also been able to shrink that roofline a little bit on the inside, giving us very similar interior room. And then we have a fairly square and practical back end, something that we don't really find in very many 3-row EVs. We certainly don't find that in the Model X or the Model Y, or of course the Mercedes-Benz EQS. Now, continuing our look at the styling back here around the rear, we have some very unique taillights for a Volvo. We no longer have the taillight section and this accent strip tied with one another. These are now separate modules, of course, with full LED animations when the vehicle is turned on and turned off. There's an amber turn signal inside. We don't know whether that's going to make it to the US market. There is a windshield wiper. For some reason, this causes a lot of consternation among our EV viewership, whether or not an EV has a windshield wiper in the back, so fear not, the EX90 will have one there. And then we have a pretty tall and pretty vertical hatch with a cargo area that looks substantially similar to the XC90 in terms of its shape, but by the numbers it does appear to be a little bit larger and perhaps a little bit more useful as well. The EX90 is actually a little longer than the XC90 because of some of the aerodynamic realities for an electric vehicle. By extending this rear portion of the vehicle out a little bit, they can get cleaner air and they can allow the design to tuck in a little bit for that cleaner air. If you look down the EX90 from this angle, you'll really notice how the greenhouse curves out and then curves back in as the lines go from the front of the vehicle to the back of the vehicle. It really gives it an elegant proportion. This reminds me a little bit of some recent Rolls-Royce designs, but it also has that aerodynamic function there in the rear. Of course, no EV would be complete without some cool electric door handles. Of course, we find those here, but in typical Volvo fashion, they've decided to go a little bit more pragmatic. So it is still an actual door handle that you can pull out in winter weather if you're worried about that icing up, but it does have that electric release functionality just as you'd expect in an electric vehicle, and of course the extra song and dance of the power handle popping out. Charge door is right back here on the driver's side, but this of course is a pre-production European model, so it's not going to have the regular US charge plug in there. Over the last decade or so, Volvo's move towards electrification has been accompanied by a refocus on performance and handling. So we're going to find some of the widest tires ever available on a Volvo in the new EX90. We have 265 width tires up front on 23-inch wheels. Let me know what you think about this wheel. It kind of looks a little punk retro 1980s to me. Now you might be thinking 265 width tires aren't anything to be surprised about, but back here we have 295 width tires. And a closer look at the wheel reveals that we have a removable aero insert, so if you want more of a traditional open alloy wheel design, you can do that. And Volvo's moved the logo up there rather than having that iron logo in the center. Volvo's may be manly, but this is not actually the male symbol. This is the alchemy symbol for iron. That's the origin of the Volvo logo, just in case you've ever wondered. Let's start out our interior walk around by taking a look at the seats themselves. We have a new seat design, although logically it's pretty similar to the old seat because there was nothing wrong with that design to begin with. This is likely going to be one of the most comfortable seats in this segment because the XC90 was already one of the most comfortable as well. We have a new seat control down here on the seat itself. I can't give you all the details on that operation just yet because this software is a very, very early beta version. We have a manual extending thigh cushion. I am a little surprised that some of these motions aren't powered. Expect seat massage and other features like that to be available at some point in time. If you've long wondered why Volvo was so dedicated to manual steering columns, fear not, we now have a power memory-linked steering column in the EX90. And now for what you've all been asking about, how is the back seat? Well, let's hop back here with the front seat comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. You can see I have about 6 inches of legroom left, so definitely roomy. Interior volume in the EX90 is almost identical to the XC90. It's a little bit larger in key dimensions, a little bit smaller here and there as well, but right in keeping with this large European 3-row segment. And that is definitely different than we find in some other EV 3-rows or plug-in hybrid 3-rows out there that have a lot of sacrifices. You'll notice I have a flat floor back here in the second row. And lots of headroom. If I move out here to this seat, I have about 4 inches of headroom left because of this glass roof in this model. Now, the distance between my head and this pillar over here, it's maybe about 1.5 inches, but still pretty roomy as far as this segment goes, and it means that you can definitely put taller people right here in the middle, because sitting in the middle, I have about 4 inches of headroom left. This is a very comfortable second row. Now, these seats do slide forward and backward, and we have a fold-down center armrest right there in the middle with some cup holders, and a shoulder belt for the center position that comes out of the seat itself. That's something that I really appreciate because it means that if you put a child seat in the middle position, it's going to stay very centered in this second row. You can, of course, fold it down to put some of those larger items right through there into the vehicle. So that's a very practical design. Also a practical touch, it appears that you may be able to leave a child seat latch anchored into these outboard seating positions and still tilt and slide them forward. Now you'll notice that the seat back and bottom cushion, they do articulate a little bit versus one another, but not as much as many 3-row crossovers. As you'd expect out of a company very focused on safety and family, we have a center seat that not only slides forward, but also has an integrated child booster cushion available. So depending on the age of your children, this could be a really handy thing. And even if you have children in other forms of child seat, they're going to be a lot closer to the driver and front passenger. It also allows you to portion that space a bit more equitably. Now let's take a look at the third row. So for that, I'm going to let you guys see what's going on back there, and then I am going to hop into the third row. Seems relatively easy with that tilt and slide mechanism there. Can go ahead and close the door, pull the seat back. It's still in a comfortable position for me. And then, as you can see, I have plenty of room. I will go ahead and fold this seat down so that way you can see what's going on. You can see that the footwell appears a little bit more constrained back here than the XC90, but the seat bottom cushion I think is actually slightly higher off the ground, making this a bit more comfortable for adults. As you work your way up, you'll notice that this is a 2-person third row. So this is a seat 7 maximum. There's likely going to be a 6-seat version at some point in the future. Of course, Volvo hasn't said anything about that at this time. I have a reasonable amount of legroom, maybe about ½ an inch left with this seat essentially all the way back, so definitely suitable for a taller driver up front, a taller passenger in the second row, and even a 6-foot-tall person back here in the way back. Now, headroom, obviously, that is a bit limited. I am going to have to crane my head to one side in order to actually put my head back there to that headrest, but I could sit back here for a while if I needed to. Other interesting touches, we have height adjustable shoulder belts for the second row seats. That's a really nice touch as well. And we do have air vents back here for the third row passengers, as well as some cup holders. Now, this appears to be the docking location for a roller style cargo cover, although this is a very early pre-production model, so not all of those accessories and options have been fitted in here. But something that we've seen from Volvo for a while are these little slots right here in the ceiling. This is where you can attach one of their cargo nets. That way it helps keep cargo in the way back. And that's when the third row is folded, because a lot of customers in this segment are going to want the third row folded most of the time. And we have a new twist there where we have a powered third row mechanism, first time ever in a Volvo product. I don't know if this feature is going to make it to North America, but at least in this prototype, we have latch anchors for both third row seat positions. As I said before, the cargo area appears to be pretty generous. Over here on this side, we have the controls for the power folding third row seats. This is the button for the extending tow hitch receiver, and then this model has an adaptive air suspension, so you can raise or lower the vehicle. Under the load floor, we have a surprising amount of extra storage. You can see down here, you might be able to fit a 22-inch roller bag. There's also room for the roller style cargo cover, but no spare tire, just as you'd expect out of a modern EV. If you're a fan of big front trunks, you should know that this front trunk is not terribly large. We have room for the power cord here, the can affix a flattened tire inflator, and a small amount of storage around. This is not too surprising because most European car companies tend not to favor large cargo areas in the front because there is some valid concern about exactly how a large front trunk would perform in the event of a frontal collision. Crash structures are definitely highly dependent on the deformation characteristics of what's going on in the front of the vehicle. So if you had a big rigid object in your front trunk, your car is not necessarily going to crash the same as if it had a gym bag up front. And that's logically why we don't find front trunks in this or the Mercedes EQS or a number of other European EVs. Going for a look around the interior, you can see that Volvo has an all-new design theme for the interior as well. So new buttons up here for things like the built-in telematics system, the lights, things like that. They've really slimmed down this safety module integrated into the roofline. Still plastic visors for the driver and front passenger. Tons of speakers in here. This you see is the latest Bowers & Wilkins audio system. We have, again, those height-adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger. And this is going to be a fully vegan interior. So no real leather is going to be offered in this EX90. This particular model has the wool blend upholstery. What's really interesting about this is that it's about 30% wool. The rest is recycled material, so this is not going to pill like an old sweater. You see we have fairly aggressive side bolstering and seat bottom cushion bolstering. It's probably going to be adjustable, although I don't have any information on that yet. You can see that extending thigh cushion right there. Very comfortable seats, and they definitely have a nice breathable quality to them. Moving over to the front doors, lots of soft touch materials, just as you would expect. And from this angle, you might just barely be able to see that see-through wood trim on the dashboard. That is ambient lighting behind there. It's not a pattern in the wood. So if you're in strong light, you won't see it. All you will see is this very light blonde colored wood, but at night, that's really going to shine through. Lots of premium stitching materials going on the front doors, all new door switches and door handles right there. The door release is that handle just up front there. Moving over to the dashboard, we have, again, more of that clean design where we have that large band of what looks like an air vent running across the dashboard, but the center section doesn't appear to actually have any air coming out of it. Now, on camera, it may appear all one color, but this is actually a fabric insert right here on top. If I zoom in, you can see that fabric there. We get the imitation leather on top of that, real wood trim below that, again, with that ambient lighting going on inside. If I cover that, you can see that there. Moving up to the top of the dashboard, we have the Bowers & Wilkins center channel speaker that we've seen in Volvos for a while, but this center channel speaker module also hides a driver monitoring camera. The center screen is in basically the same position that we see in other modern Volvos, but it has grown enormously. This is now very wide and very tall, and it's perched on top of the dashboard in a very modern fashion. This software is not quite ready for prime time here, so not everything works in the software as you might expect it to, but you can get a general idea of some of the animations that the software is going to provide. Obviously, it provides the latest Google Map integration. Obviously, it's going to have smartphone integration as well. You'll find climate control functions down here in these touch areas down below. And in case you're wondering, yes, you can heat the steering wheel, you can heat the seats, and you can even ventilate the wool seats. So you don't have any limitation based on the fabric that you choose. We don't have any idea about exactly what kind of apps are going to come in the future, but this gives you a general idea of the apps that are going to be available in this software. Again, very, very early version of the software. So with things like integrated plug share, Google News, YouTube, things like that. So you can do things while your car is charging. Now moving down the dashboard from there, we find a Qi wireless charging mat. This is the volume and play pause button for the infotainment system. It has some really cool touches inside. Like you can see those accents inside, they kind of look like fish scales. We have a roller style cover for those two large cup holders there. Padded center armrest with a pretty decent storage area behind. It's actually a dual level storage area. You can close those little doors off, or you can open it up and have access to that entire well. I expect a half gallon of milk would fit in there if you wanted to. As you'd expect out of a modern EV, we have a nearly flat floor up front with some extra storage below. So you can see there's a carpeted section there. This is also where we find some USB inputs and a little storage strap to help keep your things in place. This is actually based off of the seatbelt fabric, but it has kind of a ratchety mechanism in it. Volvo has ditched the joystick style shifter for one that's mounted on the steering column. You can see that park is the button right there at the end, and it appears that this is also going to control the adaptive cruise control functionality. There is a small LCD right there behind the steering wheel to give you essential information as you drive, but most things are going to be provided by the large central instrument cluster. There is, of course, also a large heads-up display, just as you'd expect out of a Volvo. You can see more of that wood trim on either side of the wheel. Speaking of the wheel, this is an all-new design for Volvo, and one that we're probably going to see in the rest of the Volvo lineup coming soon. No paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel, so I'm not sure how we're going to adjust regen braking. That's probably going to be done in software over there. We have a combination of physical and touch buttons on the wheel, so when you touch these, the entire module moves, and then it knows what option you've selected by where you touch on the module. Over here we have the infotainment controls. Over here we have the controls for the adaptive driving systems. New turn signal stalks over there, of course, with windshield wiper controls as well. Since I had a limited amount of time with the EX90 in Volvo's studio, let's talk about the batteries and the motors in my studio. It's going to have just one battery pack, at least at the beginning, 111 kilowatt hours. About 107 kilowatt hours of that pack will be usable. The battery is divided into 17 different modules, and it looks like the modules are replaceable and serviceable. So if you're concerned about the future viability of some EVs and this particular complaint, this is going to be less of a concern than, say, a Rivian or a Tesla pack, which is more tightly integrated. Obviously, there's a trade-off here. It's not going to be as energy dense as far as the entire pack is concerned because of the separate modules, but it really improves that serviceability question. There are going to be two different power levels and basically three different electric motors in the EX90 lineup. The base version is going to be a dual motor setup, 408 horsepower total. These numbers don't add up quite right, but on the spec sheet Volvo has provided, the front electric motor is rated for 241 horsepower, rear electric motor for 160 horsepower. The interesting twist here is that even though the rear motor is a little bit less powerful as far as peak torque than the front motor, the vehicle can obviously decide where it wants to send power at any point in time. And it can balance the power 50-50 for slippery situations up to about 320 horsepower. If you get the twin motor performance version, then it gets a much more powerful rear electric motor, and the one we were taking a look at in Volvo's studio was likely that twin motor performance model because it gets 268 horsepower in the rear, 241 up front, and it appears to be having a bit more of a rear power bias, which is why they logically have those wider tires in the rear. The ability to mechanically disconnect the rear motor from the equation makes a lot of sense because that's going to improve your fuel economy out on steady-state open highway travel. And then because of the design of this system and those twin clutch packs, it can very quickly reconnect the motor whenever needed. So it's likely going to take a little bit less time to reconnect than the front disconnect feature that we find in some EGMP products from Hyundai and from Genesis. This system is also going to give you torque vectoring capability. By the design of this system, it looks like it should be able to give you all 268 horsepower on a single rear wheel whenever it might want to. At this point in time, we don't have any official range estimates, but Volvo has said that they expect the North American version to be EPA rated for about 300 miles of range. That's likely going to be the regular twin motor version, although I would not be surprised if the twin motor performance posted pretty similar numbers as long as it had relatively similar tire sizes on it. That's probably going to be the big difference. The ability to disconnect that rear axle is going to mean relatively similar performance. As far as charging goes, this is going to feature a peak charge rate of 250 kilowatts, and they're saying it will go from 10% to 80% in 30 minutes in optimal conditions. Digging deeper into the spec sheet, there are a few interesting tidbits. This vehicle is going to support vehicle to home, vehicle to load, vehicle to vehicle, and vehicle to grid power offloading from the battery pack, although we don't have any specifications on how much power the vehicle can export and exactly how that's going to be done, whether it's going across the DC pins or the AC pins on the connector. Another interesting tidbit is that this is not an 800-volt architecture as some people had assumed. This is still nominally a 400-volt architecture, although DC fast charging routinely occurs over 500 volts in these systems. It's worth noting that at the moment, only Lucids and Hummers actually need 800 volts to achieve their maximum charge rates. Even something like a Porsche Taycan could probably get really close with just 400-volt charging infrastructure. Just ask Tesla, all the modern Teslas still charge at about 500-something volts, about 255 kilowatts peak. So this is really in keeping with a lot of other vehicles currently on sale. 800-volt architectures could save a little bit of weight, but they're not really going to improve your DC fast charge times. Instead, DC fast charging is more a function of battery design, battery pack design, and especially battery pack cooling, which is something that Volvo seems to have a good handle on. Also, this pack is fully conditioned and it will precondition the battery if you've selected a route with a DC fast charge station on it, or you've just typed a DC fast charge station into the nav system. It's automatically going to handle all the cooling and heating required to achieve those maximum charge rates. Be sure and stay tuned for more details just as soon as I can get my hands on them, but at the moment, if you're interested in one of these, you can get one well-equipped according to Volvo for under $80,000, and that will buy you a just over 400 horsepower dual motor model. So Volvo is not skimping on the options, and they aren't going to be bringing us a rear-wheel drive only version or a front-wheel drive only version. In fact, Volvo's new trend appears to be going back to rear-wheel drive, which was their roots for decades and decades before their most recent crop of products. Now, the on-sale date, that is a little bit tricky because we're about a year away from you being able to actually get your hands on one in your own driveway. You will be able to pre-order one of these right now. Actual production timelines are a little bit unclear, but likely going to be about a year away at this point in time. They're really just waiting for that South Carolina factory to get online. Now, depending on where you are in the world, they may be either built in South Carolina or they could be built in China, primarily for the Asian market. For North America, 100% of production is going to come from South Carolina. Again, that's really important because of the way that the latest tax incentives have been structured in the United States. Because this will be built in North America, it should qualify, again should, for at least half of the federal tax credit. Whether it will qualify for the entire federal tax credit or not is going to be determined on where the battery raw materials came from, and that is something that we just don't know at this point in time. So expect likely a half credit on the less expensive versions of the EX90. More expensive versions may actually be too expensive to get any tax credit, and whether or not it gets the complete one, more details on that coming soon. But I am certainly very excited to drive the EX90 because this brings everything that Volvo fans have been asking for to the electric market. We get a real usable third row, a big cargo area in the back, a practical and boxy EV, something that we don't find too often, dripping with the latest technology and the latest gadgets from Volvo, and of course, all of those active safety systems. If I were to put my own family in an electric vehicle and I wanted absolutely the safest electric vehicle on the roads, it would probably be this EX90 with all of the active safety systems and likely the next generation of those autonomous braking systems as well. Again, Volvo has kept a lot of details really cagey. We don't know what level of autonomy it will support. We don't know exactly how those expanded autonomous and semi-autonomous safety systems will function, but you can expect them to be the next generation beyond what we currently find in the XC90, XC60, etc. For more news and information, be sure and hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen, and I will see all of you next week.